Welcome to the Nomi Bachar podcast. Her mission is to help people reach their true potential, transform limitations, and achieve a life of fulfilling success. Nomi is a human potential expert, motivational speaker, and trained psychotherapist who created the highly acclaimed method and program Gates of Power. She is the author of the best-selling book Gates of Power, Actualize Your True Self, and founder of White Cedar Institute for Expanded Living.
Hello, everybody. This is my third podcast in a series of 5, exploring what is the difference between fixing and transforming. I feel that there is a big confusion about that going in our minds, and it needs to be clarified. So if you find that you're interested in this podcast and you haven't listened to the other two, go ahead and listen to them because they all feed into each other. And there are going to be 2 other ones in this series of going beyond fixing and creating a real transformation for yourself. I'm going to go over some of the basics if you were not listening to the other 2, so that you can catch up. I was talking about the fact that I see a lot of people come to my office and I look and see around me who are trying very hard to improve that word, to improve themselves, doing all kinds of things, from meditation to yoga to gym to running to beautifying to getting thin to achieving goals, to try to striving. And many times I see that there is no fulfillment within that, real fulfillment in the heart, in the soul. And the striving continues and continues. And I have to say, I was one of these people. I was a striving one and tried to do my best to be the best at everything. I was a chronic excelling person. But that did not mean that I was actually fulfilled or peaceful or happy or joyful or any of those things. So let's look at what's going on here. And as I said in the other ones, the other 2 podcasts, I covered some of this. So I'm going to be short on that. At a very young age, we get messages or we interpret or we imagine that we get them. Because sometimes, peers and teachers and parents are struggling themselves. They don't have what it takes to always be totally nurturing to us. So sometimes they're impatient, sometimes they're angry, sometimes they don't have time, they don't have the ability. But what happens to us is that we interpret that there is something not quite okay with us, that we're not enough, lovable enough, powerful enough, smart enough, whatever enough, that we don't have what it takes to be loved and nurtured the way we need to be. And out of that, we begin to go against ourselves, feel that this self, who is me, is not quite okay, and I don't really like it that much. And that happens in a very young age, obviously. All of that happens in your emotional self, in the part of you that I call the emotional self. It's the part that holds all of the feelings. So the feeling is painful. It's frustrating. There's something wrong with me. At that point, there is another part of us, our defensive self, the one that is watching over our survival, and that part kicks into high gear and starts weaving ways that I can get the love, that I can get the approval, that I can get the respect, that I can get the connection that I need to survive. As I said, all of this happens quite young. And so now what is happening, we turned away from our authentic emotional self because we don't like it, because we don't seem to think it's okay. And we're starting to be very attached to our defensive structure that we're creating, that we feel is getting us the attention, the approval, the love, the connection that we need. So now we're starting to identify with our defensive structure. And that structure is a little different in each one of us. But basically, the defensive structure is a way of being that allows us to get the attention, the approval, and the love that we need. So you might think, so what's wrong with that? That sounds very good. We find a way to get the love, the approval. Well, not so. This structure is not really who we are. It's a manipulative, or I should say, it's manipulative. It's coming to compensate for the lack of acceptance and the lack of respect and love that we have for ourselves. And the bigger that part grows and becomes dominant, the less you are able to connect to your true feelings, your true emotional self. So I was talking about the fact that once we identify with that part, the defensive self, we start fixing ourselves to be good, to be acceptable, to be beautiful, to be smart, to be successful, to have the status, to have the money, to have the fame, the fortune, the car, the husband, the this, the that. We go into this striving mode that becomes quite addictive, and fulfillment is not found. So what do we do in the Gates of Power program? I guide you in the program to connect to a third part that I call the expanded self. That part is you in a state of oneness with the universal consciousness. That part of you is the essential you, the most authentic, most important part of you. Your emotions, your emotional self is important. Your defensive self as a survival self, when it's normalized, it is important. But who you are and the source of your power and your wisdom, your creativity, your ability to be compassionate, your highest intuition, they all sit in your expanded self, that part in your consciousness that realizes its oneness with the universe. So in the program, I teach you to tap into that part of yourself, to learn to live from there, to think from there, to do from there, to connect from there. And then I give you the tools to turn that part of you into a parent to the two other parts, your emotional self and your defensive self, to be the parent, to be the healer, to be the coach, to be the best friend, to be the leader of this little team that sits inside of you. And that is very important. The other very important thing that you get from the program is you learn to, since you're thinking and leading your life more and more and more from that place, your expanded self, you can start opening up and energizing all the 7 areas of your life, which we call gates. And we have the gate of the body, the gate of emotions, the gate of dialogue, the gate of creative expression, the gate of life path, the gate of silence, and the gate of knowledge. These are areas of life that need transformation. And who is the one that can actually create transformation? It is only your expanded self. So it's very important that you know that part of you, that you connect with it, you become one with it, because you are one with it anyway. But you need to embrace it and live in it and from it, and actually allow it to blossom within you. When your expanded self has the tools that you get from the program to heal and love, comfort, support your emotional self becomes healthy, becomes trusting of itself. You start giving your emotional self the messages, the positive messages, that there isn't anything wrong with you. You're actually okay. You're just doing what people are doing in this life. There's nothing so wrong with you that you need to feel awkward or self-doubting. Those messages can penetrate slowly, coming from your expanded self towards your emotional self. And what happens is your emotional self becomes slowly a healthy kid. And it's usually a very playful, joyful, creative, expressive part of you that loves to feel feelings and loves to connect to people, to the world, to animals, to nature and such. At the same time, your expanded self is also doing some work with your defensive self. It is relaxing it, normalizing it. And when your defensive self is normalized, it's just protective. It's not constricting and confining and super reactive the way it is when it is not healthy. When it's protective, it's just there to remind you that you have to look right and left when you cross the street. It's there to remind you to eat if you haven't eaten, or it's just watches over your survival in a very appropriate way. That's how you want it to be. So now that you have a healthy team, a joyous emotional self, a protective defensive self, and a leader, an expanded self that can convey the messages of wisdom to these two, convey the messages of truth and love, and help these two live in that environment of truth. Now you are confident. Now you are grounded. Now you are peaceful. And now you can fly. You can create. You can experiment. You can innovate. You can have healthy relationships. You can meditate. You can enjoy people and things and your work and so on and so forth. Now you're really breathing. You're living. You're allowing life to go in, and you are expressing the love, the wisdom, the creativity that you have within you. Now it is a whole different ballgame. And that's where you want to go. This is transformation. I look forward to us working together, discussing, sharing. Let's discover who we truly are. What can we do for ourselves, for others, for the world? How can we develop our potential? So take the first step. Subscribe to the podcast, and then get some more information. Go to gatesofpower.com.